And I'm a junior marketing and economics major and the president of the UMass Democrats. Yeah, right? Keep it going. Before I begin, I want to thank the UMass Democrats Executive Board, the Advocacy Council advisors, the university, and of course, Attorney General Maura Healey and her team. This event would not have been possible without the large contributions and efforts made by all these amazing groups and individuals. I believe it's safe to say that there are many challenges facing our country and community, from tackling climate change, to modernizing government, from funding education, to electoral reform, from providing affordable healthcare, to ensuring basic human rights for all. The list goes on. And these days, it's easy to get discouraged with our current state of government, and because of that, it has become easy to lose hope. After the election, I felt distraught. In fact, I will be the first person to say that I lost faith in our democracy. Unfortunately, I still had an exam to study for that week, and like most of us, I started to procrastinate. And at the end of the week, I was sitting in the Du Bois Library, and I came across an article. It was about Maura Healey's response to the election results. After the election, she saw this as an opportunity to encourage people to get involved. She said, "I've heard from so many people who weren't involved, but something about this election has ignited something in them, and they're reaching out, and they're saying, how can I get involved in my community? How can I run for office? How can I support candidates who support the things that I believe in? What do I need to do?" It took me some time to realize that the Attorney General was right. My determination to get involved in politics came from my peers here on campus and within our local community. Throughout the last year, I've seen people all across this campus conversing and comforting one another. RSOs teaming up, organizing, and building coalitions. I've read many emails from many of our own members asking what they could do to help. In fact, I recently attended a town hall event with our Congressman Jim McGovern. He mentioned that an 86-year-old woman came up to him once and said, "I've never attended a political event. I've never made a call, but I want to get involved now because I am scared." And if that wasn't enough, she was ready to knock on doors and register voters. See, that's the true meaning of democracy. An individual's ability to voice their opinion, act on it, and bring about a change. Although I won't be able to inspire you to bring about change like Maura Healey or Barack Obama, I promise you that there are many opportunities to get involved, especially here at UMass. And if we organize and mobilize, as Maura Healey once said, don't mess with Massachusetts. Woo. Maura Healey is a true leader, fighting for the values we believe in and the interests and concerns of all the people of Massachusetts. She has shown determination in pursuing justice. She has displayed great courage in taking on the predatory lenders and for-profit universities that pry on the most vulnerable students. She's speaking out and making sure that everyone is aware that she will do whatever it takes to support and protect our state and the UMass community. Maura ran for this office to be the people's lawyer, and she's been standing up for all of us the last 2 years. She has made our fights her fights for equality, for civil rights, for safer communities, equal pay, and economic security. Since the election, she has been the voice for all the people, and we know she'll continue to have our backs as we move forward. Ladies and gentlemen, students and faculty, it is my honor to introduce the Attorney General of Massachusetts, Maura Healey.
Yeah!
Thank you, Sonia. Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening. It is so great to be here. I want to thank Sonia Kablani and Manuel Bonder and Lucas Harrington and all of the UMass Dems. I just had a chance to meet with them a few minutes ago, and I am so inspired to know that there are so many young people out there who we are counting on to continue to work hard to restore our faith in democracy. Let's give a hand to all the young people who are here tonight. I also want to thank Chancellor Swamy. We've had a chance to work together on a number of issues, including really important pieces of litigation against our president right now. And the University of Massachusetts has been such a wonderful partner, is such a gem, and it is great to be back here on campus at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Thank you so much to all of the educators and staff and faculty who are in the room. And I meant what I said when I acknowledged some of the young people in the UMass Dems in particular. You know, last week, I don't know how you felt, but I felt really good about last week. I was so heartened to see so many young people turn out and vote. We had people running in districts that were drawn intentionally so that Democrats couldn't win, and we had successes in those places. We saw such a diversity of candidates out there, women running all over this country and winning, people of color all over this country running and winning, and that's a really, really good thing for democracy, and it's something we're going to build on starting tonight, okay?
Yes.
You know, I am here with a very optimistic spirit. I know it's easy to be disheartened and dismayed by so much of what we're seeing, and it's easy to be cynical too, but I think we have to find and continue to find ways to see the inspiration, to see the hope, and to remember, as I like to say, the Constitution doesn't begin with I, the president. It begins with we, the people. And that's what democracy is all about. That's what last week is all about. And that's what the weeks and the months and the years ahead are going to be about with your help. So I'll tell you a little bit about why I'm here tonight. I've been doing these town halls all over the state. I think this is maybe our 16th or 17th that we've done. And it's our first one on a college campus, actually. So I'm really excited about that.
Woo.
And you know what I'm doing is having welcoming folks to a conversation. I feel like as your Attorney General, as the people's lawyer, that's what I ran on. That's what I'll be running on again next year as I seek re-election. You know, it's my obligation to come back to you and to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and to hear from you, most importantly, to have a conversation and to have dialogue about the challenges and the needs facing our families, our communities, our state, and our country. So I want to thank you for coming out tonight. And I want to tell you that for me, this is about doing what I set out to do when I was running. I said that the Attorney General was going to be there to be a voice for those who are vulnerable, to make sure that the Attorney General is there to enforce the law, to stand up, to protect people's rights. And that's what we've tried to do over the last 3 years in a number of different ways. It's about values, it's about principles, and I think now more than ever, we need to be prepared to fight really hard at the local level on up for those values and for those principles that truly make this country great. There is a difference between right and wrong. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or what party you're a part of. Fundamentally, we're all Americans, and I think for far too long, too many in this country have lost their way in terms of what it means to be American and what it means to stand up for American values. Now, you probably heard a little bit about some of our lawsuits against the president and the federal administration, and I'm happy to talk a little bit later about that. But I wanted to just give you a snapshot of some of what's also happening in the office that isn't in the headlines or the papers that much, but is nevertheless just as important. Now more than ever, I need to make sure that we're running a law firm that stands up for people across this state. And for me, that means standing up and fighting for everybody who calls our office or reaches out to our office on a variety of issues. It also starts with focusing on our young people. And as I look out at these amazing students here tonight, I want you to know a little bit about some of the work we're doing around student debt. You probably know that student debt in this country is $1.4 trillion and growing. It's the fastest growing form of debt in our nation. And so many families here in Massachusetts are struggling with student loan debt. So we've done a few things. We've set up a student loan assistance unit. You contact my office. We'll work with you and your family to help you get into a better repayment option. We're also taking on and suing the likes of the Trump universities of the world and other for-profit predatory schools that are raking it in on the backs of vulnerable students. And we're going after them to make sure that students who've been victimized are made whole. In Hampshire County alone in the last year, we've worked to help 450 students be relieved of over $1.5 million worth of student loan debt that they should never have incurred in the first place. So that's just an example of some of what we're doing in this space, but it's so important, and I want you to know about it. We're also out there every day making sure that people actually get paid for their hard work, the work that they do. You understand that here across this state and across this country, There are a lot of people who have been the victims of wage theft, and our Fair Labor Division is out there going after those employers who cheat their workers, who don't pay them minimum wage or don't pay them the wages they're entitled to. This is a big problem here and across this country. And just this year alone, we've been working hard on wage theft, helping to secure over $700,000 this year so far, including $500,000 just this past October to nearly 1,000 workers who were wrongly denied their wages by employers. But, you know, I want you to know, if you've been the victim of wage theft, you contact our office. That does deserve a clap, because for those individuals, you know, I don't care if it's $800 or $1,600, you better believe it. It matters big time to that family, to that worker. In the area of subprime auto loans, you may remember the debacle of a few years ago with those subprime mortgages, right? Well, guess what? The auto industry figured out a way to replicate that same terrible model. And so we've gone after some of these entities that are out there making bad loans, high interest loans, illegal loans to consumers. Often for used cars that are nearly broken or broken as soon as they drive them off the lot. And just this year alone, we got here in Hampshire County over $320,000 back for 77 of your neighbors. That's the kind of work that we do in the Attorney General's office. Equifax. All right, Equifax, the update on Equifax. If you haven't gone to my website yet to figure out what you're supposed to do with this, in the midst of this outrageous, egregious breach, please visit our website, okay? There are tips for all of us as consumers out there about how we can better protect our identity right now, the steps that we need to take. As you may know, we were the first state to sue Equifax for its breaches. I think we sued them within 1 or 2 days of the announcement. But more than that, I have helped draft and propose legislation here in this state that I hope becomes the model for work that we need to do across this country, because it's our data. They found a way to monetize it and make a whole bunch of money off of us. We need to reform that industry, and I want to start by leading right here in Massachusetts. So we'll follow that. And our work on the opioid crisis continues. I want you to know that I started out the day earlier visiting Recovery High School in Springfield, Massachusetts. It's one of 5 recovery high schools, and it was an incredibly inspiring and moving experience. As you know, we continue to lose people 5 or 6 a day across Massachusetts to the opioid epidemic. And dozens more are revived and brought back to life through life-saving Narcan. I know from having spent time with families all over the state how devastating this crisis is. And I'm going to continue to work hard in our office using all the tools and resources available to us. That's meant over the last 3 years going after bad prescribing practices, working to get Narcan in the hands of first responders. We are currently in the midst of the largest public health investigation probably in American history. Our office working with others to investigate those who manufactured and distributed opioids. And I'm a big proponent for continuing to focus on access to treatment and care. We need to do everything we can to help families who so desperately are looking for help for their loved ones. But I'm also at a point, folks, and you can appreciate this, that the best way to stop addiction is to stop it before it sets in. And that means education, and it means prevention. When I listened to a young man tell me today that he didn't learn in school anything about the dangers of drugs, he thought marijuana was harmless because that's what the adults in his life had told him. We need to do more by our young people. And so earlier this year, I announced that in partnership with GE, my office has launched a project called Project Here, and we're going to be in every public middle school teaching young people about substance use prevention and healthy choices, healthy decision making. We owe it to our young people, okay? So I want to hear, and I want it all across our state. And before we take some questions, I'll take a minute to talk to you a little bit about our actions against the federal government, okay? I get asked a lot, what is this about suing Donald Trump? Why are you suing Donald Trump? Why are you suing Donald Trump, it seems like, every week? Well, I'll tell you, for those of you, who was at the Women's March? All right, here,
Woo!
see, everywhere. That was a really, another inspiring event. Well, as I stood on the Boston Common, for those of you who were there, you may remember that my message to Donald Trump was, "We'll see you in court."
Yes.
Now, when I said that, I didn't know it would be so often, nor did I think it would be so soon. But unfortunately, this is a president who's chosen to make good on any number of illegal and unconstitutional campaign promises. And as your Attorney General, my job is to enforce the law. And one of the beautiful things about our system and the way it's supposed to work in all its institutions is that no one's above the law. But until and unless we have a president who actually respects the rule of law and ceases engaging in taking actions that are harmful to American interests and that are illegal, we're going to be there to hold the line. And, for me, the guiding principle as I wake up every day and I read the latest executive order or the latest decision by one of the federal agencies to take us backwards, my question is, what does this mean for Massachusetts? What does it mean for our residents? What does it mean for our businesses? And that is what informs the work that we do. You better believe it. I care deeply about the fact that Massachusetts led when it came to universal health care. People need to understand that health care should be a right in this country and not a privilege enjoyed by the few. And that's why I sued. Because when the president decided to cut those payments, that put our health care market at risk. When the president decided with Scott Pruitt, who I had the distinction of serving with, I guess, when he was the Oklahoma Attorney General, when he basically set Scott Pruitt loose to roll back all the important environmental regulations and protections that have allowed for cleaner air and cleaner water, you better believe it, we sued. We, of course, have a moral obligation to leave this planet better off than we inherited it, but we also have a legal obligation. Following the Massachusetts versus EPA decision of years ago, we undertook steps here in Massachusetts, written into law, to make good on some of our commitments around combating climate change. So when he undermines that, when he puts that at risk, when he puts at risk our clean energy economy, you realize that here in Massachusetts, we have a thriving and growing clean energy economy. More clean energy jobs in Massachusetts than total coal jobs in the entire country. You better believe it, we're going to sue when those steps are taken because they hurt Massachusetts' interests. I think about the early days, and it seems like centuries ago at this point, but do you remember when the first travel ban came out? All right, so I was at Logan Airport that first day that it was being implemented. And, we took action in the face of that because we need to stand up for the fact that this country truly is a nation of immigrants. But also we need to recognize that what the president did put so much of our institutions, our economic lifeblood at risk. What am I talking about? Well, in the days after that decision came down, you want to know who I heard from? Our major teaching hospitals concerned about STAR research fellows who weren't going to be able to come to Massachusetts to work. I heard from professors at the University of Massachusetts who weren't going to actually be able to continue teaching, even though they taught engineering for decades here because of that travel ban. I heard from business leaders, tech, life sciences, and others who know that this state really is thriving based on a global economy and a knowledge-based economy, all of which were undermined by the president's decision. So you better believe it, we sued, and right now the scoreboard reads, us 3, him 0. We beat him each time he's come up with that data. Yeah. But it's about Massachusetts' interests. As it is for the nearly 20,000 DACA-eligible and DACA-protected students, including some who attend this very fine institution. It was about standing up for them and their rights. These young people who've done everything right, played by the rules, are going to school, are working, are paying taxes, are serving in our military. You better believe it, this government, our federal government, owes them our end of the bargain in what was their decision to basically out themselves a few years ago. It's about standing up for residents here in Massachusetts. It's about standing up for Massachusetts' interests. That is what will continue to guide me as your Attorney General. That is what will continue to inform the work of my office. As I say, I want for a different morning. I want for different news. But until and unless that happens, we're going to do our work in the court, and we're going to do our work together with people. You know, one of the great things that I've come to see since November is the degree of activism and engagement. It matters. You know, the healthcare rollback was stopped because people came to town halls and they talked to their congressmen and they talked to their legislators and they said, no, I care about healthcare. I'm worried about my family, and it was their voices that made that happen. And so I want you to know from the bottom of my heart, your voice matters, your activism matters, everything is local. There was a guy in Massachusetts who years ago said all politics is local. Well, democracy is local. You better believe it. And finding ways to engage in local races, local organizations, this is where it's at. I'm delighted to be here tonight. I look forward to taking your questions. I look forward to taking your comments. And again, I thank you once again for the opportunity to serve you as the people's lawyer.
So first, we're going to have a question from the College Democrats of UMass. So,
Yeah, good evening, Attorney General. On behalf of the UMass Democrats, I just want to thank you again for being here tonight.
Oh, there you are. Sorry. And what's your name?
Manuel.
Oh, Manuel.
So in connection to the work you've been doing, going after predatory lending practices and the Department of Education's policies that are hurting vulnerable students, what more does this fight for a better, more just system of higher education contain, and what can we as students do to keep that going forward?
Well, it's a great question, Manuel. Your voice is incredibly important. You know, I think that it's probably a tie right now between the number of times we've sued Betsy DeVos and Scott Pruitt. Both are terrible on so many fronts, and they're doing things that are really, really detrimental and really harmful. And so I'll give you an example about the Department of Education. Unfortunately, our United States Department of Education now that seems to be increasingly run by former for-profit school executives and industry folks. You know, years ago we started to recognize the problem with predatory practices in this space, and we went after some of these bad actors who were making unfair loans to students or institutions that pretended to be schools offering an education but really weren't. And one of the things that came out of all of that work was an agreement, a rule that we reached well over a year ago with the Obama administration. And it was a rule that basically said, look, if you've been the victim of that kind of fraud, then you're going to get a clean slate. You're not obligated to pay that loan because that loan was unfairly made to you. You were the victim of fraud. And you know, that was a rule, folks, that financial services industry folks came up together with alongside colleges and universities in higher ed and state AGs like our office. Everybody, all stakeholders were at the table. It was something that made sense. Now, of course, because it made sense, it's something that Betsy DeVos chose to undo when she immediately got in. And that's why we sued on that. And we're going to continue to sue her administration when they do things that hurt students. We're also going to continue to go after the bad actors, those who engage in unfair loan servicing practices and target students. And certainly we're going to continue to go after predatory schools. In this, though, Manuel, what was so important, and I think what is so compelling, and will be as we make our legal case, were the stories that we heard from students who were willing to set out in affidavits what actually happened to them. You need to continue to tell your story, whether it's in a letter to the editor, or in a blog, or just talking to family members, calling your legislators, state and federal. Make known your story. That is the most powerful thing I think that you can do. The other thing that's incredibly powerful is all about the organizing and voting people into office at all levels, school committee on up, who will make the decisions that you want to see made as a matter of policy. I think we know the consequences of failing to do that. And again, I'm heartened by what I saw last week in the number of young people turning out to vote. That's what we need to see, and we need to see those numbers grow. And if you're the victim of any sort of student loan abuse or lending practice, if you have questions, remember, I think we're the only office in the country that's done this, but I think it's really, really important. I have a student loan assistance unit. You can call my team, email my team, however you want to get in touch with them, and we'll be assigning somebody specific to work with each and every one of you.
we're going to have a question from the college Republicans.
Hello. Hi. What's your name?
Hi, it's Carly.
Carly?
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Could you please speak to the effects of your interpretation of the 1997 assault weapon ban, more specifically, the legal standing of responsible gun owners, the economic effects on small business owners, and the implications of this interpretation on the legitimacy of our courts and the legislative process in our Commonwealth?
Well, thanks for the question, Carly. So, I'll tell you the effect. The effect of enforcing an existing law is that sales of assault weapons have effectively stopped here in this state. So the illegal practice that was going on has ended.
Yes.
I think the good news is nobody had to be arrested or prosecuted because basically we sent out notice to people reminding them of the law that had been on the books since 1998 and making clear that we were going to be enforcing that law, which is one of my responsibilities as Attorney General, is to enforce the law. So that's what's happening on that front. And, by the way, sales of guns continue in this state. I think if you looked at the latest report, you should check this out. Jack McDevitt, who is a leading criminologist at Northeastern University, just published a report that he submitted to the legislature that passed the gun law a few years ago. And it's very interesting, and it contains important findings. But one of the things that he shows quite clearly is that we are a state that while we have strong gun safety laws on the books, we nevertheless have sales of guns continuing. And in fact, most people are able to receive permits and licenses to carry. I think in Boston alone, over 90% of the people who apply will get a permit and a license to carry. So business has not been adversely affected or impacted. But what has happened here is that to the extent there were illegal sales of military-style AR-15 rifles that were prohibited under the 1998 law, those sales have stopped. But from my perspective as somebody who believes deeply in the Constitution, it's important that we all recognize that rights aren't mutually exclusive and that we can live in a world where we protect public safety, where we protect public health, and we also respect the Second Amendment. And one thing that I think gets lost in this whole discussion is that we have a public health issue on our hands. When 300 Americans a day are killed or injured by a gun, that's pretty significant. That's not happening in any other country in the world. Think about that. Think about an airliner crashing every day. Now, a couple things are happening. 62% of gun deaths are by suicide. And I think we know as a nation that we have a lot of work to do when it comes to addressing issues of mental health. But we also need to realize that like any other consumer products that people purchase, there are certain rules that have been put in place in the interest of public health and public safety. And so I think we can do both. I think that in Massachusetts, we've shown that we can do both successfully. And I wish there would be greater dialogue and discourse across this country because we need it. The fact of the matter, the vast majority of Democrats and Republicans across this country believe in common sense reforms. Universal background checks. We have those background checks here in Massachusetts. But the problem comes oftentimes from guns that are coming into our state illegally from other states that have really lax laws. And that's why I vigorously oppose any efforts at concealed carry reciprocity, for example, because that's going to undermine the strength and the principles behind our Massachusetts laws that are really grounded in public health and public safety. I picked out three. I'm sorry. Three?
Number three?
Number 3, where are you?
No. Okay.
Okay. And on the gun stuff too, I want to recognize this isn't just a Democrat issue. I'll tell you one quick story as I pick a number. Number 4, seriously? All right, number 4. So, let me tell you something. A few weeks ago, the Las Vegas shooting happened. Terrible. I couldn't believe that here we are again. Because my enforcement of the assault weapons ban followed what was then the nation's largest mass shooting in Orlando, if you remember. And it was then that I found out that, notwithstanding the assault weapons ban, assault weapons were still being sold here in Massachusetts. But I'll tell you what I did following the Las Vegas shooting. I reached out to my Republican colleague in Nevada, and I reached out to him, the Attorney General there, and I did two things. One, I offered the assistance of our victim witness advocates. We fortunately have experience here in Massachusetts, most recently with the Boston Marathon. We know what it takes to have to handle and process and work with something like that. Over 600 victims and survivors of Las Vegas. And so we put them on a plane, we flew them out to Las Vegas, and they helped set up operations there, where they were working directly with people coming through the door, looking for victim compensation assistance, looking for counseling assistance, looking for assistance with retrieving their personal items that were left on the concert field that night. And I was really, really proud, and I think you would be too, of the work of our victim witness advocates in that time. But my conversations with the Attorney General went further, and it resulted in the two of us working together, Republican and Democrat, from rural and urban states, on a letter that was signed by nearly 40 attorneys generals from around the country in support of Congress's effort to look at what's going on with bump stocks. And, we need to work together across this country and find common ground on issues. That's for sure. Now we'll get to your question.
Hi, my name is Jackson Lupner, and my question is, so in Massachusetts, Title IX forbidding sex discrimination in federally funded education remains interpreted as protecting transgender people, despite the lack of federal guidelines to that effect. In 2018, there's a ballot initiative to remove gender identity as a protected class in Massachusetts anti-discrimination law. If the anti-discrimination law is revoked, would you uphold gender identity as protected under the Massachusetts Constitution, which prohibits discrimination because of sex, in alliance with the current interpretation of Title IX? And if you would not support such an interpretation, can you please explain why?
Sure. Well, thanks for the question, Jackson. I'll tell you what I'm going to focus on, and I will hope that everybody in this room who believes in equality will focus on is defeating that ballot initiative next year, okay? That's where I'm putting my efforts. I want to work with every resident. I want to work with every business. I want to work with every nonprofit. Anybody who cares about the fundamental belief and believes in, this idea that every human being, each and every one of us, has value, has worth, and should be treated with dignity and respect. It's as simple as that. Will you join me in that fight? We've got work to do next year. And this is personal for me, Jackson.